on the islands or in Suriname or Brazil, these are the terms that are used, they would hide up into the mountains where they formed independent communities that would then raid the rich plantations for food, for armaments, for fun. The handsome inheritances, I'm just seeing where I was, the planter elite experienced the rising wealth and visibility of the free mulatto population as a powerful threat to Saint-Domingue's established racial order. The handsome inheritances some planters bestowed on their mixed race and of necessity illegitimate offspring, since interracial marriages were for the most part not possible. Their inheritances drained capital away from white planters' legitimate families who were not slow to complain to royal office holders. Of equal importance, mulattoes' numbers, wealth, and sophistication troubled the clarity of racial distinctions. Their growing visibility and influence in metropolitan French political and social circles challenged the planter elite's control of colonial governance. Wealthy mulattoes resident in Paris had encouraged France's nascent but growing abolitionist movement, and ultimately exploded into revolution as the wealthy French-educated mulatto Auger led an armed revolt in the months preceding the massive slave uprising of August 1791. Now, how could both the mulattoes' real and fantasized powers be brought under control? This was a burning issue in the Caribbean. Beginning in the 1760s, royal office holders, in concert with the island's imperial councils and colonial courts, sought to publicly humiliate mulattoes and began to seriously curtail their legal and economic rights. Mulattoes were required to carry their manumission papers with them at all times. Frequent court cases challenged the legitimacy of those papers, reducing even well-to-do mulatto planters to slave status. Mulattoes were prohibited from carrying arms, sectorial codes were imposed, most especially on the mulattas, and employment opportunities were increasingly curtailed. Most tellingly, as I said, interracial marriage was officially banned. On the rhetorical plane, Moreau de Sommeil went even further, constructing an elaborate calculus of color gradations, embracing 13 different colors, from African sooty black to European women's delicate pale complexions, with the goal of imposing a complex mathematical structure upon Saint-Domingue's exuberant racial mixtures. On 13 carefully detailed charts, Moreau laid out 11 categories of racial métissage and 164 possible racial combinations. If you can put it in a chart, then you have control. However, the bottom line was simple in his narrative. Only exclusively white coitus could produce pure white offspring. Any admixture of African blood, even at the furthest remove imaginable, would be detectable, revealed through a dull white pallor, or even more tellingly, the faintest black shading on the fingernail cuticle. And so on Moreau's pages, whites would always be white. Blacks could never lose their blackness. More critically, the whiter the seductive, sexually powerful mulatto became in Moreau's fantasies, the closer she and her mixed-race offspring approached the line in which the closer that she approached the line in which blackness appeared as whiteness, the less fertile she became. Though as sexually alluring as ever, perhaps even more so, she had become a sterile figure. As a result, Moreau assured Creoles and metropole alike, elite white dalliance would never undermine carefully color-coded racial hierarchies. The ever white and mixed-race woman would produce no children, empowered by their complexion to make claims to the status and rights of those who were purely white. The tide of ever whiter mixed race children stopped with the white but not quite white mulatto. Still, the growing number of mulattoes of various hues could not be ignored. In a startling rhetorical move, Moreau imaginatively reincorporated mulattoes as key supporting actors within a harmonious white patriarchal world. He did so through what Garraway called the colonial family romance, a vision of Saint-Domingue as a white patriarchal paradise in which all the inhabitants, white, mulatto, and black, were sexually related and culturally united under the beneficent and quite sexually active white patriarch. Within Moreau's fantasized world, all the island's women and children, especially white and brown, were sexually connected to the white planter class, either as his legitimate wives and offspring or as his concubines and illegitimate children. All owed allegiance, obedience, and love to the patriarchal planter father. Of course, as his property, his mulatto daughters would be subject to his sexual desires, as their mothers had been. Wherever he turned, the planter would be surrounded by his own sexual productions. Incest fantasies coalescing with fantasies of the nymphomaniacal mulatta, Moreau produced a Sadian world of incest and libertinage. At the same time, he effaced black male sexuality, thus emasculating his black sons, the ultimate Freudian fantasy and fear. So conceived rhetorically and sexually, mulattoes constituted what we might think of as a colonial third estate. Mimicking the third estate in France, it would stand between the planter aristocracy and the masses of the enslaved and potentially dangerous Africans. Educated for their new rules, the white planters' mulatto children would serve as clerks on their father's plantations. These are, of course, not really necessarily their children or their fathers. They would be apprenticed to essential crafts and, most importantly, guard the no-man's land that lay between the rich sugar plantations and the maroon enclaves in the mountains where people who had escaped slavery had gone to hide. Indeed, since the late 17th century, mulattoes had been used in just this way, conscripted to hunt for escaped slaves and keep the maroons at bay. In Moreau's racialized imaginaire, the intermediate race would become an intermediary racial caste, part white, part black, and solidly in the service of the planter's patriarchal autocracy. But as events in metropolitan France were to prove, the Third Estate's loyalty to the established aristocratic order was an uncertain thing. As the Age of Revolution assumed global proportions in the 1780s and 1790s, both French and colonial Third Estates readied for revolution. Moreau's fantasies of devoted mulatto daughters and sons failed to stem the tide. Indeed, our ironies only multiply when we realize that Moreau published his charts, his description topographique, physique, civile, politique, and history in the mid-1790s after he fled Paris, seeking refuge in Philadelphia, as the sexual and racial paradise he wrote so passionately about tumbled down around the white planter elite. Even more significantly, the new revolutionary Haitian government dramatically rejected the concept of an intermediate race. On declaring Haitian independence in 1804, Dessalines, who was the first governor of a free Haiti, proclaimed that all who would be Haitians were black, whatever their actual complexion. There were many radical Hungarians who had gone to fight against the French attempt to reestablish slavery in Saint-Domingue, and they were included as black Haitians. The Atlantic revolutionary post-colonial states, be they Haiti or the United States, seem to have difficulty reconciling sameness and difference, investing those who are different with rights. Now, I wonder if we should take a little break now, And if you can have any questions, we've covered a lot of material, then we will move on to the Anglophone. And we even have a picture, a sexy picture for the Anglophone. Never trust the Brits. Are there any questions, any disagreements, any challenges? We can hope.
Maybe just one
yes,
comment for people to consider when we move on for the next section.
Yes.
This mulatto is similar to other kinds of mixed blood in other.
I'm having a little difficulty hearing you, but let me come around. I'm an old lady, I'm afraid.
Be careful. For example, in Philippines, the mestizo,
Yes.
the mixed blood between the Spanish
Yes.
and the local
This is
people.
very, very similar.
And in Malaysia, there's Chinese with local people, but there are also different kinds. So those phenomena, as you said, there's a double mixture of desire and maybe even self-desire, but rejection, but also this marginalized figure in the society, disrupting the social order or colonial hierarchical order could be detected in other culture, other colonies. Yeah.
So that, and especially I think, I would imagine, also if you look at some of the colonial, like British India,
Sure.
and how they dealt with
Or the
these
Vietnam
issues.
French,
And the French in Vietnam,
Yeah. Indochina.
and Indochina, and so this shouldn't be too alien
Right.
to your imagination,
Yeah.
how this is especially when I was growing up during the Second World War, the exotic Japanese woman, was this spy, etc.,
Yeah, right.
And, who's the one in France during the First World War? Meta Hari? So there were all these images of the exotic Asian woman who might be of mixed race. But then, as I say, you also see it throughout Latin America. And so I hope that I'm talking about something that isn't just specific to a time and place, but that is something we all deal with in terms of the complex relation of sameness and otherness, and the role we try to think that the other is going to stabilize us, and how it doesn't, and how that there is no stability, especially for feminists. The mulatto, now we'll move over to the Anglophone, to Jamaica, Barbados. It expands because eventually the Brits try to get a lot of the French islands also. A mulatto class growing in numbers and wealth, threatening the clear racial distinctions necessary to sustain a plantation slave culture, challenged the Anglophone Caribbean as well. Beginning in the 1770s, two highly respected and widely read Jamaican writer planters became Edward Long and Brian Edwards, broadcast their alarms. Interracial sexual relations had become ubiquitous, concubinage commonplace, the numbers of mixed-race persons expanding exponentially. Nor was a solution readily available. The needs of European colonizers produced the very demographic and social patterns that threatened white colonial stability. Not only was miscegenation and concubinage common among the planter elite, where masters presumably had the pick of the most beautiful slaves on their estates and the power to compel or command sexual favors. It was equally common, and I hope you also see echoes to the Me Too movement today in terms of sexual exploitation of women workers. It was equally common among non-white elites who served, or concubinage was equally common among non-elite whites who served as plantation overseers, clerks, and small shopkeepers, as well as among the many British officers and soldiers temporarily stationed on the islands. Such men, Long and Edwards explained, could not afford the cost of maintaining a legitimate white establishment, nor were they in the position to attract the affections of Creole heiresses of wealthy widows. Yet, as white men in the tropics, young men had needs. Their food needed to be purchased and prepared, their houses cleaned, their laundry done. More critically, frequently beset by malaria and yellow fever, they required dedicated nurses, expert in local herbs and preparations, which, if they did not cure, at least soothed the colonizers' sufferings. Mulattoes were excellent nurses, Long and Edwards both insisted. They were well informed about local herbs and medicines. They were noted for their kindness, gentleness, fidelity, and their demure and chaste carriage. Of course, young men were not above seeking sexual pleasures. Long and Edwards advised those recently arrived to the islands to choose an and here again I'm thinking Somerset Maugham is a nice reference for the Pacific. They were advised to choose an attractive young woman, preferably a mulatta or a quadroon, either a virgin or one with few previous relationships.